Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Just wanted to speak for just a couple of minutes about PARC and about some of the problems involved in being in PARC. There are a lot of reasons to leave PARC, as a lot of other states are doing. One is that, as Mr. Sturgis said earlier, it's falling apart. And I don't think you want to be the last state left in PARC because the costs are going to be enormous. Another reason is that the costs are enormous, even when we're not the last state left. That's the reason that Georgia got out of PARC, and believe me, the people in Georgia, the education establishment was gung-ho for PARC until they saw how much it's going to cost, and we have reason to believe that PARC people are really lowballing what the costs are going to be. So that's something that you need to ask a lot of questions about, I think. Another thing about PARC is that the format of the test is going to be very different from the kinds of tests that generally have been given. It's going to be one of these cutting-edge tests. And I'm not a testing expert. I would just suggest that you look at some research about the way these tests have been done in the past, similar tests that have been given in states such as Kentucky and California, and they were a disaster. They spent millions of dollars on them and had to get out of it. So another question to ask about PARC. But the real reason that I'm here to talk about PARC is the data implications, student data privacy, because that is a concern. One thing that we need to remember about Common Core is that it is not an education model, it's a workforce development model. And one of the people who was identified by Dr. Milgram yesterday as one of the 4 directors of Common Core is Mark Tucker of the National Center for Education and the Economy. And he has a famous quote that he said to Hillary Clinton back when the Clintons were first elected in the 90s. He wrote a letter saying the federal government should remold the entire American system for human resource development, a seamless system of unending skill development that begins in the home with the very young and continues through school, post-secondary education, and the workplace. That's what Mark Tucker thinks should be done by the elites in high positions so that they can manage the economy. You can't possibly let the economy develop on its own. That would never work. So Common Core is part of the system to build databases, to build huge, massive student databases. This is a quote from the Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan, in June 2009 at the beginning of all these ideas about Common Core. Hopefully someday we can track children from preschool to high school, and from high school to college, and from college to career. We want to see more states build comprehensive systems that track students from pre-K through college and then link student data to workforce data. We want to know whether Johnny participated in an early learning program and then completed college on time, and whether those things have any bearing on his earnings as an adult. So if we're going to know all of that about Johnny, we have to know everything Johnny ever does. And that's what the federal government wants to know. So let's look at how the federal government is tracking childhood. Just to go through this very quickly, the stimulus bill that was mentioned yesterday required states that if they accessed the state fiscal stabilization fund, they had to agree to several things. And one thing they had to agree to was to build out their state student database. A lot of states, most states, were already building state student databases because this predates the Obama administration. It was already happening. But the stimulus bill gave it another shot in the arm, as did Race to the Top, because when you agreed to Race to the Top, you also agreed to take specific steps to build out your student database. And the feds are requiring, all of this is requiring identical databases among all the states. The U.S. Department of Education said to receive state fiscal stabilization funds, a state must provide an assurance that it will establish a longitudinal data system that includes the elements described in the America Competes Act. What that means is that all the states have to build identical systems. Now, why would the government care that you're building identical systems? Because there is a federal statute that prohibits the federal government from maintaining a national student database. It's 20 U.S.C. 7911. It says, nothing in this chapter shall be construed to authorize the development of a nationwide database of personally identifiable information on individuals involved in studies or other collections of data under this chapter. This is the education title. So, if you can't do a national student database, but you can create identical student databases in all the states, then that data can be shared. That's the way it works. So you have a de facto national student database. All right, now, there is used to be a federal student privacy law called FERPA, the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. It was enacted in 1974. It was gutted 2 years ago in January by regulation, not by statute. That was required going through Congress. So the administration gutted it by regulation. Without getting into all the weeds of that, what it essentially means is that the U.S. Department of Education or your state Department of Education or a local school district can share personally identifiable student data with literally anyone in the world without parental knowledge or consent. And the only thing they have to do is use the right language for it. They have to say, I am designating you an authorized representative, and I will give you this so that you can do an audit or evaluation of an education program, which is also very broadly defined. It has been described by experts who deal with this data stuff all the time as a data free-for-all. That's under the federal law. Now, and states can have privacy laws that are better than FERPA. You can go beyond FERPA, which is a good thing, except that you have an agreement with PARC. And this is what PARC has agreed to do. You've agreed to give PARC whatever information they ask for on your students in connection with the assessment system. And we don't know what PARC is going to ask for. The tests haven't gone into effect yet, so they haven't said what they're going to ask for. But you've agreed to give it to them. And PARC has a cooperative agreement with the U.S. Department of Education, which says that PARC agrees to work with the department to develop a strategy to make student-level data that results from the assessment system available on an ongoing basis for research, including for prospective linking, validity, and program improvement studies, subject to applicable privacy laws, but FERPA is no longer applicable. And PARC also, the cooperative agreement also says in the appendix, the grantee, meaning PARC, must provide timely and complete access to any and all data collected at the state level to U.S. Department or its designated program monitors. So PARC has agreed to give the federal government access to any data that it gets on Ohio students. And we just don't know yet what that's going to be. And also in your agreement with PARC, you have agreed, as all states who went into PARC had to work to remove obstacles in your state law to what PARC wants to do with this assessment system. And we don't know exactly what that means either, but presumably they could say, if you have a data privacy law that is stricter than FERPA, which is not hard, you have agreed to modify that so that PARC can do what it needs to do with the data. PARC is a real problem when it comes to data because it doesn't really matter what your state privacy law is. If this data is going to PARC, the U.S. Department is given access to it. And I was in another state a couple of months ago, and the leader of the other consortium, the other one is Smarter Balanced. The president of Smarter Balanced was testifying at this hearing. They had the identical cooperative agreement with the federal government. And so one of the senators there asked him about this and read these paragraphs to him and said, so should we be concerned about this, that a lot of students' data is going to be given to the federal government, or the federal government will be allowed access to it? And he said, well, he said the U.S. Department hasn't asked for it, and apparently thought that that would solve all the problems, that, well, the government hasn't asked for it. Of course, the tests haven't gone into effect yet, so he's just missing, he hasn't asked for it yet. And the federal government can ask for whatever they want to. So that is a problem with PARC. And I think you need to be aware of that. Another thing is that they may tell you, because this is kind of all in the early stages since PARC hasn't gone into effect yet. Assuming that they ever get any tests out before they fall apart. But one thing that you may hear is that, well, all of this is going to be anonymized, so you don't have to worry about it. The tests, the students, their names won't be there or whatever. But remember, the cooperative agreement says student level data. So anonymization, does that help? Well, every time make any sort of presentation and there are any IT people in the room, they laugh at that. You can't anonymize stuff, not really. Because this is a quote from a gentleman who's written a lot about this issue. He says, utility and privacy of data are two goals at war with one another. At least for useful databases, perfect anonymization is impossible. There are so many data points, and with data matching, you can figure out who people are. You just know almost instantaneously, they tell me from IT. So when they say, don't worry, it's going to be anonymized, worry, because it's probably not anonymized. So as long as you stay in park, you're connected with this pipeline of data going to the federal government. And because FERPA has been gutted, once the federal government gets it, you've lost all control over it. And FERPA, because of the changes there, you also have to worry about what your own Department of Education can do with it, what your own schools can do with it, but that's another problem. So I'm happy to take